Neiras, a little rural city from the Paraíba state in Brazil. So, but I write in a blog a couple months named from pediatricians to pediatricians and to general public. But I'm following your work. I think 4 years ago I became in contact with your work, and since then I'm learning a lot, and I think you are someone to be known here in Brazil too, because your book isn't here, the films, the Fed Up film, and recently Sugar Coated aren't here yet. So I'm trying with this to
Netflix.
yes, to present you to Brazilians.
Do you have Netflix in Brazil?
Yes, I think Fed Up is in Netflix. I recommend.
So is Sugar Coated.
Oh, Sugar Coated is in Netflix, but I think it's not in Brazil yet, because maybe just in United States or Canada. But okay, I have a few questions. I have interests in this field of childhood obesity and all these metabolic problems we are having. I think you are a leader in this field. So
Well, I appreciate that. I think a lot of people are leaders, but I do have a slightly different way of looking at it. I will admit that.
yes, that's the motive. I'm trying to talk to you a lot because I want to hear some of your thoughts. And first, I saw in the Sugar Coated quote that came at me a lot, took me a lot of attention, and I think it's the main problem that we are having in this last 30 or 40 years. I think the most massive epidemic of all mankind in this kind of metabolic disease. So, what do you think? What cause we have to think in all these problems? Causes.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to separate what we're talking about. We have to define it properly. Everyone thinks this is about obesity. I don't think so. Everyone thinks obesity causes the diseases we see, like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, cancer, dementia. Everyone says obesity is the cause. And if obesity is the cause, well, we know the cause of obesity. You eat too much, you exercise too little. It hasn't worked yet. No one's been able to fix it. And while it is true that obesity is correlated with every single one of the diseases that I just mentioned, it's not at all clear that it's the cause. When you actually look at the data, it does not support causation. And I'll show you why. Very simple. If you look at the obese population, 80% have one of those diseases we just mentioned, or more. So, yes, it's true. 80% of obese people have type 2 diabetes, or hypertension, or lipid problems, or heart disease, or cancer, or dementia, or fatty liver disease. Yes, 80% do. But that means 20% don't. If this were a problem of obesity, then why don't the other 20% get it? Second problem. Let's look at the normal population. Normal weight. BMI under 30. Turns out 40% of those people have the exact same diseases. Normal weight people get hypertension. Normal weight people get lipid problems. Normal weight people get heart disease. Normal weight people get type 2 diabetes. Normal weight people get cancer and dementia and fatty liver disease. But they're normal weight. So it is true that obesity increases your risk. I don't argue that. That's absolutely true. But how do you explain causation when a percentage of the obese population don't get it and a percentage of the normal weight population do get it? That is not causation. Yes, obesity is correlated. Yes, obesity is a risk factor for further damage. No argument. But that does not add up to causation. So once you dissociate these two phenomena and separate them, obesity being one thing and metabolic problems being another, what you come to realize is that there's one thing that causes both of them. And it turns out that obesity is just another marker for the metabolic dysfunction that you see in all these other diseases. Yes, it is true that the metabolic dysfunction can cause obesity. Yes, it's true that the metabolic dysfunction can cause all these diseases without obesity. So it becomes just another part of the phenotype, but it doesn't become the cause. So the question then is, okay, what is that thing? And the answer is, well, it's this thing called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is behind all of these other phenomena. And insulin resistance yields hyperinsulinemia. And when insulin resistance yields hyperinsulinemia, because the pancreas has to make enough insulin to cover the resistance, that raises insulin levels all over the place. And if your fat cells are insulin sensitive enough, then the insulin will be higher at the fat cell and will force energy into fat. And so you will have obesity as one of the manifestations of your insulin resistance. Now, if you believe this model, that means the insulin comes first. If you believe the other model, then the obesity comes first. But now there's a whole host of data that says the insulin comes first. And I'm not the only one who says this. Many people say this. In fact, Jesse Roth at the NIH said this 50 years ago, and basically people ignored it. The person who's done the best work in terms of nailing this down is a guy up at the University of British Columbia by the name of James Johnson. He's created a model, a mouse model, where he knocks out the INS2 gene completely, so it doesn't work. And then he provides haploinsufficiency for the INS1 gene. So what he has is he has normal mice and he has insulin haploinsufficient mice. Turns out the insulin haploinsufficient mice don't gain weight. They don't get any chronic diseases, no matter how much you feed them. And not only that, but they double their lifespan because they're making less insulin. So here's a model that shows that by reducing the amount of insulin, you can get rid of all of these other phenomena because ligands downregulate their own receptor. Insulin downregulates its own receptor. So if you get the insulin down, things improve. Well, now you have a different target. Before, the target was weight, and nobody's been able to fix weight. Everyone says, eat less, exercise more. Hasn't worked yet because obesity is the wrong target. Because obesity is downstream of the problem. It is a manifestation of the problem. It is not the problem itself. You have to target the problem. You don't target the result of the problem. So people don't understand this. So that's part of my job, is to explain this. So then you say, all right, we'll accept that insulin is the problem. Hyperinsulinemia is the problem. Insulin resistance is the problem. What causes the insulin resistance? And the answer to that is also relatively simple. The answer is ectopic fat. So, not the fat over here, not the fat you can pinch, not the love handle fat, not the big butt fat, the ectopic fat. So where is that? Well, there are two. There's the big belly fat, the visceral fat here, and the liver fat. Now, what we have shown is that the liver fat matters more. The visceral fat's along for the ride, and the liver fat matters more. And when you get the liver fat down, the insulin resistance goes away. And when the insulin resistance goes away, the metabolic disease goes away. And when the metabolic disease goes away, patients can lose weight. So the question then is, okay, now it's the liver fat. what made the liver fat? So we have to, sort of back up each time, to say, okay, well, what caused this? But if you say it's just obesity, then you'll never get there. You've taken a wrong turn and you will never get to the destination. So what caused the liver fat? The answer, sugar. And that is the work that we have been doing. That's what we have shown. And we have now demonstrated pretty categorically, I would say, that when you get rid of the sugar in kids' diets, even when you don't change their total calories, when you substitute starch for sugar, and you keep their weight the same, you can basically reverse every single one of these metabolic diseases. And you can cause improvements in insulin sensitivity, insulin secretion, and insulin clearance with no change in weight. Because it's not about the weight.
This paper was in the International Journal of Obesity, no? The fructose paper?
So there are two papers that are already published. One is in obesity. That's the name of the journal.
Yes, obesity.
That was in October of 2015. And the second paper, which looked at the cardiovascular risk factors, that was published in atherosclerosis in July, two months ago.
Okay.
The third paper, we are just finishing. In fact, that's what I was doing when you got on the phone, when you got on Skype. I was actually sending the next version of the paper out to my colleagues. We will be submitting that third paper, which has all of the liver fat information. We'll be submitting that next week. And, I can't tell you where.
No, okay. But can you tell me if the results was consistent with this theory?
Completely.
Yes. So
it proves the theory. It's not consistent with the theory. It proves the theory.
Okay.
So we are very comfortable and we are very sure of where we are going with this. So here's what I would say to you. The bad fat is the bad guy. But fat in and of itself is not necessarily bad. Dietary fat depends what kind of fat. The body fat depends where the body fat is. When people talk about fat is bad for you, that just shows their ignorance. The bottom line is the visceral fat seems to be the fat that's responsive to exercise. And that's good, and exercise is good, and I have nothing against exercise. I'm totally for it. But exercise does not cause weight loss because it does not cause subcutaneous fat loss. What it does do is it causes visceral fat loss. And that's good because visceral fat contributes to insulin resistance. So exercise, by all means, it's a good thing. But don't expect to see the effects on the scale. Because when you remove visceral fat with exercise, you do something else. You build muscle. And muscle weighs more than fat. So if anything, if you exercise, you will actually gain weight. You won't lose it. So the scale is the worst place to determine your metabolic health. Because when you stand on the scale, you are measuring 4 compartments at once. You are measuring bone, more is better. You are measuring muscle, more is better. You are measuring subcutaneous big butt fat, more is better. More is better. Subcutaneous fat. For 16,000 Dutch men, one slice CT through the abdomen. After they factored out the visceral fat, turned out that the subcutaneous fat was correlated with longevity. More sub-Q fat, the longer you live. Ask any little old lady who breaks her hip whether she wished she had more subcutaneous fat or not. Yes. And then finally, the last one, visceral fat. More is worse. Now, visceral fat is only about 4% of the total. So when you stand on the scale, what are you measuring? You don't know. You're measuring, I don't know.
Yes.
Impossible. No.
Every day it's different.
It's like measuring everything, but so what? All you care about in terms of metabolic health is the visceral and the liver fat. So the visceral fat is responsive to exercise, and the liver fat which is the real nugget of truth here, which is what we have shown, is responsive to sugar. Because sugar gets turned into liver fat in the liver.
Just a tiny question about visceral fat. Here, no, we don't have technology to do some advanced measures or to do MRI. So, what is the practical way for a pediatrician to measure, to know that this patient its waist circumference and some kind of to measure insulin and glucose and do a insulin resistance.
So what I would say is that there are surrogate measures for visceral fat and there are surrogate measures for liver fat. The surrogate measure for visceral fat is waist circumference. Now, the problem, of course, is that waist circumference changes with age, changes with sex, changes with puberty. So it's, reference ranges are tough to come by. So it's hard to know when you measure waist circumference in any patient, what that specifically means. But if you use waist circumference within the same patient, that is, that you measure it today, and then you measure it 2 months from now or 10 months from now, the change will be correlated with the change in visceral fat. So by measuring it one day, you can measure it another day, and it will mean something. So you need 2 measures, so you have to see the patient twice in order to answer the question as to what the visceral fat's doing. That's number 1. Yes, fasting insulin will also be, it's a marker of obviously hyperinsulinemia, and hyperinsulinemia is a marker of ectopic fat, not necessarily visceral fat, but it's a marker of ectopic fat. And so we use that as well, of course. But then liver fat. Liver fat's where I think the excitement is. Because liver fat is very specifically responsive to diet. What we do is, number 1, we measure ALT, alanine aminotransferase.
Yes.
Now, everyone thinks the normal reference range for ALT is upper limit of 40. That's not true. It's upper limit of 25. Okay? The reason everyone thinks it's an upper limit of 40 is because over the last 40 years, it's trended upward. When I started in medicine in 1976, and I remember very clearly, because I remember the person and the doctor told me all this, ALT was 25 back then. It's moved up because now everyone has fatty liver disease. And it's silent, so no one knows. So, it's just sort of migrated rightward. So you have to look at ALT at 25. Anything above that is pretty indicative. It's sensitive, not specific, but it's indicative of liver fat. So ALT is something we use frequently. Something else we do is uric acid. And uric acid is a proxy for sugar consumption. And the reason for that is because fructose, the sweet molecule in sugar, is only metabolized. Now, are you still there? Okay, there you go. Fructose is only metabolized in the liver. So when you take a fructose bolus, like a soft drink, that entire fructose bolus goes to the liver. The glucose goes everywhere, but the fructose goes to the liver. Now, in order for the fructose to be metabolized, it has to be phosphorylated. So the first step is fructose to fructose 1-phosphate. And the enzyme that does that is fructokinase. Now, that phosphate has to come from somewhere. It comes from ATP. So the ATP goes to ADP. So for every molecule of fructose that the liver has to deal with, you're going to lose ATP. Now there's an enzyme in the liver called adenosine deaminase 1. And adenosine deaminase 1 basically rescues the phosphates off ADP and recycles them to rebuild ATP. Now, when you do that, that means the adenosine gets metabolized. So it goes from ADP down to AMP. Then it goes from AMP to inositol monophosphate, IMP. And from IMP, it goes to uric acid. And the uric acid is then released into the bloodstream. So your uric acid is a proxy measure for sugar consumption through that mechanism. It's indirect, yes, but it's a proxy. We use it. In addition, work from Rick Johnson at the University of Colorado, Denver. What he has shown is that uric acid actually inhibits fatty acid oxidation because it inhibits the carnitine palmitoyl transferase from being regenerated, so that you can't shuttle fatty acids into the mitochondria very easily. And so what happens is you end up building up more fatty acids. So it increases the rate of what we call de novo lipogenesis, new fat making, that liver fat. So the higher your uric acid, the more fat you're going to make in your liver. Well, the more fat you're going to make in your liver, two things happen. Either your triglycerides will go up, which is bad for your heart, or if it doesn't get exported out, then the triglycerides stay in your liver, and now you have fatty liver, and that's bad for your pancreas, because now your pancreas has to make more insulin to make the liver do its job, and that's the risk factor for diabetes. So your risk factor for heart disease is whether the liver fat gets exported, and your risk factor for diabetes is whether the liver fat doesn't get exported. Well, there you got it. Type 2 diabetes and heart disease, both, because of liver fat, because of sugar.
Okay.
So this is the
one doubt. No matter about quantity, how much the liver can handle before this being toxic.
Right. Everyone's different. No one's the same. So there are a few things that can modulate your response. Number one, Latinos, Native American Latinos, not European Latinos, but Native American Latinos, have two, not one, but two, count them, two polymorphisms that predispose them to developing fatty liver with a little bit of sugar. The first one is called PNPLA3, pitatin phospholipase A3. This is work from Michael Boren's group at NIH. The other one is called SLC16A11. This is work from the Sigma group in Mexico. If you have the polymorphisms that predispose, and about 19% of Latinos have, a little sugar makes a lot of liver fat. And so those people have to be even more careful. And the problem is they don't know it. So they have to consume very little sugar. Now, the rest of us, presumably, we can metabolize most of it. So then the question is, for the general population, what would be too much? The answer there is it seems to be about 25 grams a day. So that's about 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Now, the WHO said 12 teaspoons. USDA said 12 teaspoons. And that's because they got a lot of pressure from the food industry. Initially, they had said 6 teaspoons, but they had to ratchet it back up because they were under pressure. So 6 to 9 for men. 6 to 9 for men, 6 for women. And now the American Heart Association has come out and said over age 2, 6 for children, and under age 2, none. Zero. I'm very proud of the American Heart Association. They said there is no reason for babies and toddlers to have added sugar. And that means juice and, soda and virtually every sugar beverage. There's no need for it. And that's exactly right. There is no need for it. So how much is too much? The answer is depends on who you are. Also depends on how much exercise you do. Because one thing that can increase the fatty acid oxidation is exercise. So if you exercise a lot, you can consume more fructose, and it won't necessarily be turned into liver fat. It might be oxidized before it becomes liver fat. So football players, or soccer players who are out on the pitch or the gridiron for 3 hours under a hot sun, working their buns off. If they want to have a sports drink, that's fine. But if you're not doing that, then you shouldn't be having a sports drink. But that's who the sports drinks are marketed to.
I think this recommendation of AHA was very great, but I think reality here in Brazil, I think in the United States, in Mexico, babies less than 1 year old are consuming, I think, double this kids recommendation. So it's very difficult. So I would like to enter in this field of the sugar-coated movie and the recent media about the work in the sugar industry influencing the papers.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? And do you think the pressure? Do you feel the pressure?
Do I feel the pressure?
Yes.
You mean, is the sugar industry after me?
Yes.
Let's put it this way. They wish I didn't exist. At every chance they get, they will say that my theories are false and that I've been discredited. That's because that's what they wish would happen. So they figure if they say it often enough, maybe it will. But it hasn't happened yet.
Sure.
I don't feel personally threatened. I don't feel like they're after me or they're trying to, induce bodily harm or otherwise. Basically, I stick to the science. And the science is known by many people. And in fact, the science was known to the USDA Dietary Guidelines Committee.
As I have
they
personally
came with a recommendation. So they were listening to the science. And as long as I talk science, I feel safe.
Yes, as an admirer of your work, and I see a parallel with the Yudkin story, but I hope it didn't end like Yudkin, because I think all this thing was said before, and I think it's not any kind of surprise for you what's happening now and what will happen. But as I reinforce your work, because your message is getting here in a tiny city of Brazil at pediatrics.
It makes me feel very good. People in the United States, there's a lot of media attention and, they have internet and what have you. When people in other countries tell me that they know what's going on, that's very satisfying. That the information, that the world is getting the message, that it's getting out there, and that, people will start being motivated to do something about it. Think about it this way. When tobacco finally met its match here in the United States in 1994, when the Mississippi Attorney General sued Big Tobacco over Medicaid costs related to lung cancer. And then that induced the Master Settlement Agreement, so that, and that's when smoking really started to decline in the United States in the mid-90s. You know what the tobacco industry did? They moved offshore. They started selling cigarettes in other places other than the United States. And the thing was that we didn't have the internet then. And so a lot of people ended up being addicted and hooked and, basically their lives being shortened because they didn't know. This time with sugar, first of all, sugar's everywhere, but the information is getting out there. And so the ability for these companies to move offshore and, do this to other countries, they're doing it. They are doing it, but it's not as, shall we say, across the board. It's not working as well as it might otherwise. There's a little bit of pushback now in certain countries. And, You can see that because now many countries are considering soda taxes or sugar taxes. So people are starting to get the message. We have a sugar tax in Mexico already. Philadelphia voted a sugar tax. We're going to be debating it here in San Francisco and voting on it in November. Berkeley has a soda tax. The UK issued a soda tax. How about that? Australia is thinking about it. New Zealand's thinking about it. South Africa is thinking about it. Saudi Arabia is thinking about it. You know, Saudi Arabia. I mean, how crazy is that?
A week before this paper came out last week, I became in contact with a blog of Sweet Balance that was launched here in Brazil some months ago, when with all the industry set up, with specialists saying, oh, you have to consume sugar in moderation, sugar is cultural, it doesn't harm. So I made a blog post and it gained a lot of attention. So I think Brazil, it's beginning, the wave is beginning.
Remember that Brazil is a sugar exporter.
Yes.
You know, you have 19 million hectares of land that could be deforested and converted to sugar production right now. 19 million hectares. The only reason it hasn't been done is because Brazil is broke. They don't have the money to be able to do it because of Dilma and the Olympics and everything else. But there's still more of an appetite for sugar around the world. There's still more of a demand than there is supply.
Yes,
and Brazil would love to fill that void if it could afford to. So that's a big issue. So it's not like Brazil's out of the woods here.
But we have to say to people that the system will broke.
Yes, well, it'll be more broke if they do it because more people will get sick and then Brazil will have a bigger problem.
Okay, I won't take your time anymore. Thank you. I'm very pleased to present you for the Brazilians, and I hope they watch Fed Up, and I hope we keep in touch. Who knows? Sometime I can watch you live here in a conference, because I think in the future people will see how this fight that we are having to the kids' health, the population health, it's similar that the health of the tobacco time, and we are not doing terror. We are not doing terror. We are doing trying to make people think.
That's right. That's right. You know what they say: those who do not learn from history are destined to repeat it. I don't want us to have to repeat what happened with tobacco.
Thank you, and have a great time and keep the fight. And I'm looking forward to the work in the fat liver. So after it's published, send to me, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good luck. Bye bye.